So it's good to be back with the church. Even though Steph and I have been gone for a couple weeks, serving in what are called camp meetings. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of a camp meeting before, but you take your whole family to these things, and they have all kinds of services. And for instance, the one we went to, Hollow Rock, where Stephanie has been the children's director for probably over 30 years. That camp is 199 years old. 199 years they've been doing that. And then I then went from there to another camp called Camp Syker, both in the Promised Land, Ohio. And that camp's been around for 147 years. And you have a lot of services over those 2 weeks. I've been in 50 services and preached 11 sermons. And Stephanie, in the 10 days she was at Hollow Rock, she put on 30 children's events in those 10 days. Now, you think that's a lot, but honestly, the teachers in the room are going, so? 6, 7, 8 classes a day, 5 days a week, like big deal. You pastors, you think it's a big deal. You work hard and preach one sermon on Sunday. I mean, I'm preaching sermons all day, every day. So I get it. But it's great to feel like you're going out and having an impact and having your church with you and behind you as you go to those places. So thank you for praying for us if you did, and we appreciate it that Southland cares about sending everybody out, including their pastors, to go places and make an impact. And impact, frankly, is the series that we're beginning today, as we think about our lives and the kind of impact we hope to have. And so you're going to see and hear threaded throughout the series those commissions Jesus gave to his disciples as he rose from the dead and then ascended into heaven, where he said, go and make disciples of all nations. And then later we read in the book of Acts where he said, you are going out to be my witnesses. Now, this is what you're doing. And he didn't just say to those of you who are professionals, who go to Bible college or seminary and get a job doing this, but rather it's everyone who's a follower of Jesus is called to make an impact, is on a mission. Now, that's why you have to remember that what we're talking about here is more than just church in this building. That's great, and we want to have church or worship in this building. We are the church who uses this building. But you have to realize that there are two ways that you make an impact when you're a part of the church. First is within the church. And so you find ministry or some way you can serve with your gifts and passions within the body. But then there's also as the church in the world. We're supposed to be an example or a witness to what Jesus was all about when we go out into the world, no matter where you go, whether that's school or work or in your relationships or some club that you're part of. We all have been, called to have an impact. So today we're going to focus on an Old Testament story that's really a starting point or a catalyst to this whole idea of making an impact in the world. Because here's what I want you to understand today, is that you need to get a mission. You need to get a mission in your life. And so if you brought a Bible or have your device and you want to go to Southland Wi-Fi and you can go to the Bible app, we're going to go to the book of Joshua, the very first chapter, and we're going to talk about Joshua and the people today. Now, just to bring you up to speed, Moses has been leading the people through the wilderness because they disobeyed God when they were supposed to go into the land, and now God wouldn't allow him to go into the promised land, and he's made Joshua the leader. And he says, Joshua, it's time to go in, it's time to move in and take what I'm giving you. Now, just so you understand, the place that they were going, they were horrible, evil people who were doing unspeakable things to their own people, even their babies. And they were God was just not only giving Israel the land, but he was bringing his judgment on just absolute deplorable morality among all of those people. And he was taking care of them. And before anything else then, God looks at Joshua and he declares the mission. And in verse 2, if you want to read it, it'll be up on the screen though, get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I'm about to give them. In other words, Joshua, guess what? You're the leader now, so step up and do the job. And with that, then, here's the mission, verse 6. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give to them. Now, it's a hugely important, I'm sorry sometimes you feel like I'm doing all the teaching and everything, but you got to get the context in the background if you're really going to apply this stuff to your life. This is a very important transitional moment in the history of Israel. As they're moving from disobedience and wandering in the wilderness to going into this wonderful land that God had provided for them. And so God speaks to Joshua what his mission is, and I believe this story has made it through all of these centuries to come down to us today, because not only does God speak a mission into Joshua, but he speaks a mission into you. In other words, God gives you a commission. A commission. A commission means he is sending you out with a specific mission in mind. Now, the truth is, Joshua's mission wasn't all that different from Moses' mission, but the problem was Moses and the people made a boatload of mistakes, committed a lot of sins, and had trouble trusting God on the mission that he'd given them. But he wasn't done with his people. He wasn't done with Joshua. He raises him up. Now, you have to, if you read the story, if you press rewind and read it ahead, read behind it, you find out Joshua was the guy that thought they should have gone in and taken the land all along. He and Caleb, those were the two guys that believed God. But here's what happened. When you have a conversation and you're realizing what's going on here, you have to say to yourself, politics prevailed over obedience. That's what happened. The politics of the matter happened. You see, a lot of people, I want to know, I just am curious in here, how many people in the room, raise your hand, say, I love politics? I love it. I love it. Okay, I love it. I'm the only junkie. Rick and I, we're the only two, in the room. Oh, okay. We're just saying, we watch it. We care about it. We follow it. It helps. You probably should pay attention to it if your daughter's working in it. So all of that stuff. But here's the thing. I can't tell you how many people tell me this. I hate politics. You might be one of those people. I hate politics. But here's the thing. Many people say they hate it, but they play politics all the time. I just want you to know what politics is. I mean, if you have two people, you have politics. Because reality is, politics is people trying to influence other people to believe something so that something will change or a certain culture will be a certain way. And then the more people you get involved in your idea of way of thinking, then the more influence you begin to have. It's called politics, people, like it or not. You might hate it, but you use it. If you share your opinion with somebody, you're playing politics. Now, I know you all feel better about yourself now. But listen, unfortunately, people will cower to politics rather than embrace their mission for God. In other words, they want to be part of the political culture in a sense. I want to fit in. I want to be part of the majority. I don't want to be looked at in some kind of bad way, and so I just blend in with the culture instead of asking God what his mission is for me, and no matter what, following after that mission. Israel needed Joshua. Why? Because he was a leader of faith, not of politics. A leader who listened to God and not the fears or instincts of the crowd. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But here's the big question today. This is the question I want you to get. I'm going to put it up on the screen because I really want you to think through it. Are you living life to fulfill social expectations, or are you living life to fulfill God's commission? His mission on your life. Seriously, think about it. Compare it. Do I make choices based on what I think will be acceptable with my culture, or am I truly, with all my heart, chasing after the mission of God? Now, I know it can be confusing when we talk about that. We talk about this idea of mission and commission, and you're trying to understand how his impact calls you and how you're called then to impact. I remember a long time ago, it was back in the 90s, I took a youth group, my youth group, on a mission trip to Honduras to a farm school there for boys, disadvantaged boys, 300 of them. And so we have this team of about 25 teenagers going to impact these kids. And I wanted it to be, a really cool trip. I wanted them to feel important. And so our ministry was called Student Impact. And so I went to the missionary speaking Spanish, and I said, look, I speak a little Spanish, but I don't want to get this wrong. how do we say student impact in Spanish? Because I want to put that on their shirts, and so everybody knows what we're called. And he said, impacto estudiantil. And so I said, okay. And so I figured out how to spell that, and we embroidered it on the shirts, impacto estudiantil. And here we come. And we come onto the campus, we get there right away, and like we're wearing our little shirts, and we're all tired from the long trip, and like these boys are looking at us like we're freaks. And we're like, what's wrong? They're like, what's impacto estudiantil? We're like, student impact. It's the name of our ministry. Now here's the problem. The word impact doesn't have the dual meaning in Spanish that it does in English. So they thought like our kids hit each other or something. Like they go around punching each other. Students who punch each other hit, or like a collision, like impact. They think of the physical impact, and we have the dual meaning where impact also means to influence. To have some kind of change take place in somebody because of their interaction with you in your life. You have an impact on them. And yet I think sometimes that's how we can get sort of in the fog of misunderstanding when it comes to talking about being on mission for God. Because everyone has a mission. And your mission might be different than Joshua's, but his mission or his commission of you is going to be unique. Don't be confused by the story of Joshua and think you have to lead some extraordinary historical mission where books are written about you. And your story goes viral, and then eventually your birthday is something we get work off for so we can celebrate, you. But rather, it may be simply Joshua was fulfilling one person's call of God, and he's got a call upon you. And you may not be like Joshua leading a nation in some extraordinary historical event, but I guarantee you that God is calling you to make an impact on at least one person. There's someone out there he wants you to connect with. Remember the commands that we just talked about would be woven throughout all of these messages. Go and make disciples. That was for all believers. And go and be my witness. That's for all believers. That's what he's calling us to do. To be a shining light in your school or in your workplace or with your friends or your clubs for the grace of Jesus. To show them and tell them your story of how God really has made a huge difference in your life. Men and women, God is commissioning you. The question is, are you listening? God is commissioning you, and maybe you know that, but the question is, are you actually taking action on what you know? Let's keep reading. Look at verse 7. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it, and then you will be prosperous and successful. In other words, you need to take what I'm giving you seriously, because when we receive the commission of God to impact others, we must recognize that he has non-negotiables in his impact strategy. In other words, God not only gives you a commission, God gives you core values to go with that commission. And here it was called the book of the law. Now, Moses wrote the book of the law under the inspiration of God's leadership, his voice. He recorded not only the history of God's people, but he recorded the laws that God gave his people to live by. And this is what was really important, that he's saying to Joshua, look, as you go on this mission to take this land that I'm giving you, don't forget the laws that I've given to the people for you to live by. Let's be clear. God's commission or his mission in your life never contradicts his word. Never. It should always be part of your mission. That's why he said it there twice. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. He didn't say be careful to obey the laws of God that are convenient for you. No, he said be careful to obey all the law. See, the greatest source of suffering for God's people at this time happened because of their lack of obedience to God's commands. You see, here's the thing. We have to get this. I'm not sure we all take God's commands seriously enough. And really what we're saying is that we don't trust him when we disobey his laws. I don't know if you've ever thought of it that way before, but essentially you're saying, okay, I know in my heart this thing is right to do or right not to do, but I'm going to do the opposite because I don't trust that God has my best interest in mind with that law. I'm going to make a different decision that I think will make me happier or more fulfilled or will complete my objective or whatever it is. Now, I know you don't sit there and process all of that when you're considering some thought or act, but the reality is you will behave according to what's inside in your level of trust for the laws of God. God, I just don't really think you have my best interest in mind with that particular command. You see, these people wanted to be on God's mission, but they diverted away from God's strategy for their life. And this is the part I want you to get. In their desire, well, I want you to get all of it, but get this part too. That even made me laugh, and it really does. In their desire to be at peace with all the people around them that they were living with, who were outside their faith, they compromised God's commands. It was a good motive. You know, I want to get along with my neighbors. These people aren't from us, so I want to have a good impression on them. I don't want them to think I'm a freak and all that kind of stuff. And so they set aside God's commands with some objective to connect or relate to their community. Now, let me illustrate it this way. So suppose I've got a company that I own, and I want to hire you as chief operating officer. And so I find out you have great talent, you have all the skills I want and the passions I want to lead my company. And so I give you a job description, it's very detailed, I share the vision of my company with you, and then I talk to you about our company's core values. This is the culture that we're developing here as a company, and you're the one that's going to be leading that and supporting that and making that happen. And so there you go. Here's your job description, your vision, your budget, your core values. You got them all. Go do what I'm asking you to do. And then you say to yourself a little bit later as you get through in this process, you're like, you know what? If we would just get rid of some of these pesky core values, we could attract all the best talent. Because, you know, there's some people out there that really could help us accomplish our mission in business to be prosperous and successful. But, man, these pesky core values are standing in the way of us and them. And so if we're ever going to get this team together where they really accomplish prosperity and profit, then come on, I gotta back off these core values a little bit. Now, let me ask you a question. What's going to happen to you if you do that? Fired. You like how I said that? Fired. Because core values are the non-negotiables in the way we run our company. And I'm the owner, and I've hired you to carry out not just our objective of being profitable, but to carry out our objective of defining a corporate culture that looks like whatever it is. And this is what God did for the people. He said, here it is. These are the core values, this book of the law that I want you to live by. What you don't seem to understand is this is what I want the whole world to live by. And if you're not living by them, how can you be an example to the world of how prosperous and successful they will be if they trust my word? You get fired if you don't respect the core values of the owner. And God had to discipline his people. You see, Israel's greatest failure was not respecting the core values found in the law he delivered through Moses. And today, a lot of Christ followers want to impact their world, but they don't want to follow God's laws in an effort to make that happen. And honestly, I have to pause myself and think, okay, in my effort to relate or be relevant, am I picking and choosing from the Word of God those things which I think will help me, but I sort of set aside those things that I believe somehow might hinder me in my relationship building? You know, speaking of school, and we're talking to students today as well, I mean, as well as all of us, but we really want to focus on you as students as you go back into your schools. I had a good friend when I was in high school. Her name is Lori Tesnow. I met her at church camp. And Lori was one of those, I mean, magnetic personalities, and everybody loved her. She was exceedingly popular in her school, Findlay High School in Ohio. And when she came to camp, God really opened her eyes to his grace in her life, and she wanted to make a huge difference for him back in her school. And so she got a couple friends together, and they decided to have a Bible study. Now, here you go. I mean, seriously, you could really go down a few notches in the popularity scale when you start a Bible study in your school. You can, potentially. It depends on your school. And in fact, there was a lot of criticism and ridicule of Christians in Lori's school. But she was going to be excited about it. She was going to be a leader. And so she got together a couple friends, like I said, from her church and her youth ministry. And they started this Bible study. And just gradually they let people know what was going on. And I want you to know that by the end of her senior year, there were over 200 students coming to that Bible study. Over 200. And I'll add to that too, Lori became the homecoming queen. But understand, that happened in her situation. That doesn't mean it's always going to happen that way. Sometimes you want to make an impact. You want to do something great. You follow God's laws. You want to live a pure life in front of people, and it doesn't work out that way. It increases your suffering. And because it's difficult, because it's hard, or because people might reject me, somehow we think, well, if I could just skirt this and set this book of the law aside, and God's saying, no, you don't get it. This is what I'm calling you to. A life walking with Jesus and his word. I will use you to impact horizontally while you continue in faithfulness to me vertically. That's what his call is. So here's another question for you. Have you been compromising God's word in an effort to connect in relationships? Have you been more concerned about losing a friendship than you've been with walking in holiness with God? And today, perhaps, is there confession and repentance needed in your heart about that? You say, you know what, God, I'm going to stop doing it my way and I'm going to do it yours and let you take care of the results of my impact. That's what I think Joshua was trying to get the people to see as he stood up in a leader in front of them, saying, you know what, all you whiners, I'm not interested in you anymore. I'm ready to do this thing God has called us to do. And the truth is, it can be very difficult in school or at work or in important relationships to boldly stand for Jesus. But that's why what he says next is extremely important, and we'll land this plane. Verse 9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God will go with you wherever you go. See, God gives you a commission and he gives you core values, but that he doesn't just leave you out there and say, have at it. God gives you confidence. You see, this is what he says. His command to people went beyond just trusting the laws. He was actually commanding them to be courageous in it. Now, how does that work? I mean, honestly, I read this and I was like, wait a minute. So you can command people to be courageous? I mean, like, suppose I'm going with you and we're getting ready for this very violent battle somewhere. And I look at you and say, I command you to be courageous. Like, that's going to matter. You know, like my telling you is somehow going to make you brave. If you aren't brave by then, chances are slim that my telling you is going to make you brave as you step into the fog of a war. And that's why I thought it was so interesting here. So why does God command them to be courageous? Because, well, first of all, the last time they faced this opportunity, they ran in fear. And so God is reminding them, look, this time I expect full-on obedience to my command. Get in there and take the land. His mission is non-negotiable, so take control of your fear, he says. But understand, courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is the ability to move forward in the reality of fear. So it's not that you're not afraid of what you know perhaps is out there, but that you have the strength to proceed anyway with the mission that he's put you on. Now, God doesn't command courage and then not give them a reason to be courageous, though. He says it. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. You know, they have seen the mighty hand of God over the past 40 years wandering in the desert, and they witnessed the failures of their grandparents and their parents and their community, and yet at the same time, they also witnessed that God always kept his promises that he communicated to them through his leaders. And so I think this younger generation was ready to go. But with that reality fresh in their minds, they are inspired and empowered to fight their enemies because, here's what he promised, the Lord will be with you wherever you go. Now, I want you to pause and think. When was the time that you were both afraid and courageous simultaneously? Can you think of a time where you were both afraid, but you had the courage to move forward? Do you want to hear mine? I don't care. I'm going to tell you anyway. 8 years ago, when we started this church, I mean, I'm together with 9 couples. We're praying about it. And honestly, I'm just being transparent with you. I mean, there was all of this apprehension about this on a lot of different levels. Some of it fear, some of it just concern with integrity and all that kind of stuff. But then something happened, and ultimately we had to make a decision right now. And so we moved forward even when we were a little bit afraid of a lot of things. And I have to admit, I found courage to do it from this story that we've read today. Because honestly, if Joshua can go face a violent enemy, and because it's God's mission for him, certainly I can take a shot at starting a church. I mean, you guys are a little rough, but I don't think you're that rough. But this is what he's done then, is as we pursued it, we've watched him bless us, provide us everything we've needed, and we continue to press forward in courage, even though obstacles sometimes come our way. And as we start a new school year, and I say that intentionally because I don't know about you, but even though my kids are out of school here and I'm involved in their school days, I still kind of look at school starting as like the beginning of the year. I don't know why I do that, but it's how my mind works. I guess I got wired by my education. But as all of us, old or young, begin a new school year, I want you to know you are being commissioned by God. I'm talking to everyone, not just students. His great commission is still in force for you to go make disciples and be a witness for him. That's his mission. With all of the other ways you might do that, where you work, go to school, the friends you have, the things you're involved in, all of those things as tools or strategies of this, the ultimate mission of every Christ follower is to make disciples and be a witness for him. He has that mission for you, but I want you to know he goes with you. And so even though that can be a little intimidating as you talk to someone perhaps who doesn't share your faith, or even someone who might be violently opposed to it, you can be strong and courageous because he goes with you. So let me give you the big question again. Here it is, the big question of the day. Are you living life simply to fulfill social expectations? Or are you living life to fulfill God's commission, his mission for you? You see, I believe this of everyone. We've been called to make an impact. And Southland's impact as a church is only as great as the impact of every individual. I mean, we can do things together and have programs that we put on together, and that's awesome. For instance, a couple weeks ago, we did the Fast Track program, and we put together all of those backpacks and opportunity for kids who needed them to come get school supplies. So our young adults then, the day after, our church came and set it up. After that, young adults came the next day to hand them out, give them out. But look, it's more than just being nice. Because a lot of times that's what we think, well, if I was nice, then I did my part, right? There were a lot of other organizations there that had nothing to do with Jesus, helping pass out school supplies. So then the mission goes beyond just saying, I'm going to go serve and be nice. The mission is us having the courage to tell our stories, to share our faith, to tell his story, and how faith in him can totally change your life. It's being on mission to point people to the grace of God through faith in Jesus. And look, I don't know how you can think anything is more honorable than that. When you think of the fact that Jesus came to this world, died in your place so that you could know forgiveness of sins, so you don't have to worry about your eternal future. Who doesn't want to know that? Well, some people don't, but some people do, and they're just waiting for you to tell them. So will you make a commitment today for your life to be more than just going through the motions and fitting in with your culture? Will you make a commitment today to somehow have God call you and equip you to impact the people he's put you in contact with every day. Tell your story and to tell his story of faith in Jesus. That's the commitment he's calling you to. Your Joshua moment is right now. But I've commanded you, he says, be strong and courageous, because I'm going to go with you, and I'm going to give you everything you need to accomplish that mission. Now, I love it that today, as part of our prayer time for students, our Learning Zone staff came. I'm looking at them over here. Sorry, everybody's looking at you now. But what I love is that they recognize that their ministry isn't just to the preschoolers or the kids they care for in daycare, but they have a profound impact or ministry with the parents of those children. As they are willing to listen and to love and to help point them to the grace of Christ, I say, yeah, okay, you're saying, yeah, but that's in a church building and it's kind of part of a church, and so people kind of expect it, and sure, that's probably true. But they still have to step up and take action and make their voice speak these words of hope and faith. And so we pray for them every day. We pray for them all the time. But yeah, it's true. Maybe your mission field looks a little harder than that, a little more precarious, a lot of more risk involved for you to go and actually begin to develop relationships for the purpose of telling people about Jesus. But I hope today you'll make a commitment to be on that mission so that your life can have an impact for the glory of Jesus.